Welcome everyone. It's time for another AirBike update. Please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks.
Hey folks, welcome back. So in this video, we're going to talk about an AirBike update. But before I get too far into this, I know a lot of you, probably 99% of you who follow me for my large model radio control airplanes that I design and build. And it's been a big passion of mine, but aviation overall has been a passion. So I'm still going to fly my ginormous electric airplanes. I'm still going to design and build them. I am taking like a year off from building and just flying once my AirBike's done, because I want to get up and fly it and have some fun. So I just wanted to let everybody know that I'm not abandoning radio control airplanes, and I'm not going to be doing updates. Actually, I got an update coming up on why flaps change the pitch of your aircraft for model aircraft. So that's coming soon. So hopefully I can keep both worlds happy, the ultralight community happy and my model airplane community happy. So this update is about the engine for my AirBike and kind of how I chose it and the challenges I had installing it. And there wasn't really that many challenges. Actually, it was a couple of people who reached out to me and told me I didn't know what I was doing. And you know, those people pop up, but you know, there's like 200 some AirBikes in the world flying, and they all use this type of an engine mount. So if they're not falling out of the skies, I'm guessing mine's going to work. I don't want to say it's easy, because it wasn't easy, but it wasn't hard. You just got to be patient, and you've got to be very meticulous with the way you're going to drill things, and you got to have some foresight. You got to kind of think like I've always said, you got to think 4 or 5 steps down the road. Like if I mount the motor here, how's my muffler going to attach? If I mount the motor here, where's my regulator rectifier going to go, or my fuel pump, things like that. There's a lot of things you've got to kind of lay out in your head when you go to mount the engine on the airframe, okay? I want to do a real quick shout out to my sponsor, RTL Fasteners. If you go to their website and you buy more than $25 worth of bolts, nuts, blind nuts, lock nuts, all kinds of specialty fasteners, if you buy more than $25 and you use code DAG25, you'll get 25% off your order, and that's a pretty sweet deal. So when you get the drawings of the AirBike, and let me make this bigger. When you get the drawings of the AirBike, there is a lot of different drawings and examples of things, and you got to get your head around what engine you're going to mount on it. Believe it or not, they back in the day had a G25 engine on this, which just kind of blows my mind, because you know, that's pretty close to what we used to use in really big model aircraft. You know, I don't know how this flew the airplane. Now, keep in mind, back in the 90s, you know, people weighed a lot less than they weigh now. I mean, back in the 90s, you know, I weighed 160 pounds. I weigh 185 now. So I guess if you were a 160-pound person going to get in an AirBike, you know, with this G25 in it, it might have flown you, and it might have flown you adequately. I don't know. But they also go from the G25 all the way to the 447 Rotax, which is a 40 horsepower, 41 horsepower motor, which is a massive difference in horsepower size. Now I'm doing a Kawasaki 340, which is supposed to give me about, they say about 34 horsepower. I'll be happy with 30 horsepower. I know people that say the AirBike will fly on 26 to 28 horsepower fine. And I'm not, you know, I'm going to probably be weighing, you know, I gained a lot of weight during COVID, so I'll probably be weighing 175 when this thing's done. And this airplane will be part 103. It will be under 254 pounds with the 5 gallons of gas in it. So what I want to do is talk about this motor mount here. It's basically a square aluminum tube with some other L-type brackets, or whatever you want to call it. I call it an L bracket, or a L, not an L bracket, but basically an L-shaped extruded aluminum 6160 T6 that you cut into pieces that are going to attach to the square tube. So if you look in the top of this drawing here, here's your square tube up here. You have these L brackets right here, or what I call L brackets, but they're angles, aluminum angles. And you're going to put your motor mount and vibration isolators right here. And then you got a steel plate that bolts directly to your engine. And they say add amount of washers you need to get the proper distances and everything. Now, in this drawing, you notice the bolts, the way everything lines up and everything will be fine, because actually these motor mount bolts don't impede on these flanges. These motor mount bolts are way down, you know, like within here, straddling these, so they don't hit each other. You'll see in the picture in a minute. But when you get the motor mount and when you get the angle and you get all the stuff that you're going to cut up, you tend to start kind of questioning, is this really beefy enough? Because per the drawings, the wall thicknesses on this is pretty thin, and that made me kind of nervous, because the basically the wall thickness on some of this was like an 1/8 inch, and I went to 3/16 inch on the square tube, just because of my own paranoia. I mean, it's the best way to explain it. You know, I've got people all over the internet saying, oh, that's not going to work, but then there's 200 air bikes out there working. So I'm sure if I would have built it per the plans, it would have worked fine. But I did, you know, beef that up. Same thing with this angle here. This angle showed 1/4 inch material, and I went to 3/8 inch material. So probably all I did was add a little bit of weight to my plane. It probably didn't need strength, but I was just, you know, people get into your head, you know, the more that you are on social media. So this bracket right here is the one that you're going to drill to line up with your motor, but also you want to drill these holes for the motor mount and the vibration isolators. And you want to really make sure you take your time with a center punch and get this drilled perfect. Because when you go to hang this motor on this mount and everything, you know, my motor is about 55 pounds or 60 pounds, something like that. The AirBike says that it is designed for 40 horsepower up to a 60-pound engine. But there's a lot of people that I know that's put heavier motors on it, but they just put a little bit of tail weight in the back of the airplane. So you just need to really, really study these drawings and really look at the materials you're going to buy, and just make sure that you're really taking your time and you're looking 10 steps ahead. I know I'm kind of being hesitant because I don't want to ever mislead anybody, because all I want to do on my channel is share what works for me, but I don't want to speculate what would work for you. But if you basically follow these drawings, now these two little brackets here are for holding the cowling on that you could buy that covers up your motor basically, but I'm not going to put a cowling on. I'm not putting a spinner on this. I'm not putting wheel pants. I want this plane to be as light as I can get it. Okay. So when you go to mount this on that tubing, you need to make sure that you've got your tail heavy enough. So I went ahead and put on my vertical and horizontal stabilizer on the airplane, because if you don't have those back there and you hang this motor on it and the propeller, it's going to nose over. So be really cautious as you're starting to hang things, that you're constantly checking to see if the tail's getting heavy, because you put the motor on there and it might not nose over. Then you put the prop and it's really, really, really close. Okay. Then you just add maybe, I don't know, your altimeter and now the thing noses over. So be really aware. And the instructions that comes with the drawings when you buy the drawings tell you to be very careful when you're mounting the motor that you don't nose it over. So if you look at the top right here, you see my tubing, square tubing. You see the two angles, and you see the isolation mounts, and then the bar that I put in there. Now, these two bolts going horizontal through are just temporary all thread. They're not AN bolts. I just honestly didn't have the AN size I needed at the time, so I just wanted to get this hung. These bolts are fine for running up the engine and stuff like that, but I would never fly it with these bolts that are in there. So if anybody's got really good eyesight and they're looking at that going, what in the heck is he doing there? Those two are temporary. So keep in mind, right now I've just got the raw engine hanging. I don't have my exhaust. I don't have my propeller. So right now that motor probably won't nose over. I mean, the airframe won't nose over. But just be aware, as you start hanging stuff on here, you are putting weight in the nose. Sorry, everybody, about my voice. Another thing is the distance between the motor and the firewall. They show some difference. They show this being really, really super tight on the drawings, like at least an 1/8 inch. So at first I thought, okay, I'm going to hang it out an 1/8 inch. But then as I started thinking about where I'm going to hold, mount my different parts, my starter solenoid, my fuel pump, all these different things, you start to realize that, yeah, I need to get this out a little bit. But every time you push this out, you're creating a larger moment arm, and you're going to make the airplane more nose heavy. Okay, so just a little bit, a couple of inches would probably mean a certain amount of ounces in the tail of the airplane. Okay. The fuel pump on this is one that is driven from the pressure of the crankcase. It's not an electric fuel pump. And it is just driven by the, if you don't know, a crankcase is always creating like a puffing, and that puffing moves a diaphragm, which basically makes your fuel pump fuel to the engine. So, and right now I don't even have a carburetor mounted on this thing, but as I got this mounted on here, I started realizing a lot of things down the road I was going to have to consider, like where my throttle cable was going to go and how that was going to work. And I'm going to do a completely different, it'll be a short video. That's an oxymoron for me. But I'm going to do a video specifically on my doing the throttle cable. Not because it was a pain in the butt or a big chore. I just want to isolate that so people understand some things to think about. Now, originally, I was going to mount my fuel pump my fuel filter on the outside here, but I changed everything and put the fuel filter under the fuel tank here so I could see it a little bit. I didn't need to see it in flight or anything, but I was afraid of this getting knocked around, or I just didn't like it hanging out there. It was a great idea, I think, when I was originally putting the airframe together and where I was going to mount my fuel pump. My fuel filter, but it's under the engine. Now, when you look right here, you'll notice I didn't need to use a lot of washers or spacers to move this engine around. I'm going to show you some pictures in a minute of just how wacky, and it still works, so I'm not putting it down, but how wacky it can look on the way people mount ultralight engines. Okay? This to me just looks kind of dirty because I didn't clean up the aluminum, I didn't clean up the edges. This is just really rough looking, and to me this still bothers me. I may clean it all up, but it is structural, and that's what we want. But when you start thinking about if you were going to have to put spacers in, let me think of the best way to explain this. I'm going to show you a picture in a minute of how people use washers to get the motor in the right place. I know I didn't want these bolt heads right here touching the aluminum here and causing any kind of a problem with vibration or anything, okay? And I created nylon 6 standoffs here. And I've used nylon 6 on motor mounts on a friend who had a hovercraft. I've used nylon 6 it works really, really good, folks. For me, if you don't want to use it, don't use it. The only thing I'm going to change here is I am going to put washers in here that I didn't have at the time. But I don't feel real comfortable sometimes if you got to move your motor up and down using washers like off this plate right here. So what I'm going to show you is an ultralight, and technically it's not an ultralight. It's not under 254. But look at how many washers they have in this to get this motor in the right alignment and everything. And I'm not knocking this because this thing's been flying, and it's been flying great from what I understand. But I think I would have taken, on this length, I would have taken aluminum like 6160 or even a steel round bar and milled and drilled it and made a standoff. But those washers work, folks, and people do it all the time, and it just, to me, looks so weird, but it works. Here's a good picture, actually, of the fuel pump mounted to the firewall that comes off the crankcase. And that's the same type of fuel pump that comes with it. This person has a fuel cutoff, which mine will. I just don't have it. I do have a cutoff on the bottom of my fuel tank, so I can shut it off and not have fuel running back and forth. One thing about two-stroke engines that I've been told by a lot of people that fly these two-stroke engines is you don't want to shut off the engine and run the carburetor dry at the end of the day. You want to shut it off through your ignition system, and then if you are going to park your AirBike for a long time, drain the fuel bowl on the fuel tank. The reason you don't want to just kill the fuel flow and let it starve to death is over time you're starving the engine of lubrication because it's a fuel mixture. And I've had 2 or 3 people say, you know, Dag, it really does matter. Now, other people are like, oh, that's nonsense, you know, with as good as the oils are today with the mix. But if you really think about it, you know, our outboard motorboats, engines, and all these other ones, we don't kill any of them by starving them of fuel. So I don't know how many people would really know that, you know, shutting off the ignition and starving it of fuel wouldn't hurt it. So I'm just going to do what everybody's telling me. I'm just going to turn it off by the ignition. And then if I need to, I can drain the fuel bowl if I'm not going to be flying for a while. But yeah, I think that's a wild setup right there. So kind of back to mine. Oh, one thing in this picture, you'll see I got this heavy duty plug right here. Another person I've been having conversations with actually had their starter solenoid basically arc in the closed position, and it kept turning over the engine until the battery was dead. But it ended up damaging I think it's called the ring gear on the flywheel, and his starter wouldn't engage after that. And it was a big pain in the butt for him to go in and change and fix all of that. So actually, this is what I call my quick disconnect. So if for some reason my starter solenoid sticks and it's just turning over and I can't stop it when I let off the key, I'll just unplug this and it'll save my starter and the ring gear. Okay. So once you get your engine mounted and you're hooking up your instruments, because this is my exhaust gas temperature, I have a head temperature gauge. That's this little wire right here. You probably can't see it. Once you start getting all this hung and you get your exhaust mounted and everything on there, I would just ask you that you take a step back and think about how you thought about this when you started it and how it actually turned out. Because you've got to think all the way back to mounting that rectifier regulator, that fuel pump, and that starter solenoid, and how this is all going to interact with your engine. Because if you mount that engine and then start to try to figure out where you're going to mount all of this, I honestly don't know where you're going to put it all. Some people actually will mount the fuel pump on the motor mount, but there's also people saying that vibration of the motor mount can mess with the diaphragm in this and actually make the fuel pump less efficient. So you don't want this vibrating all around. Sure, you can mount the starter solenoid in a different place, but I like having a clean firewall, folks. And when you think about nothing on it right now, okay, I have no instruments, I have not even the firewall, I don't have anything on this. I was doing this to fit my exhaust, to make sure everything lined up. So, and you just got to think like 10, 15 steps down the road. Here's my throttle, which this is not the throttle that will be on the airplane. The throttle that's going to be on the airplane is going to have a little bit longer arm here, and it's going to move the throttle just a little bit farther forward, because right now, if I'm doing like an inverted snap roll on takeoff, my stick will impede on this. And I'm joking, folks, you would never do an inverted snap roll on takeoff. But right now, my stick can come close, very close to hitting my throttle. And that's not a good thing. Now, I could lower my stick, believe it or not, about 1.5 inches, but I haven't made up my mind yet what I'm doing with all that. I'm just going to move the throttle. So I hope in many ways, everybody, this kind of helps you understand how this motor mount works and hanging the motor on there. I did buy a little hoist. I've got a video on my YouTube if you want to go look at it. I bought a little like 150-pound capacity hoist, but if you put it in compound, it'll go to like 300 pounds or something like that. And I mount it on the ceiling of my garage, and it just helps lift and lower this engine, because it is possible to lift it by yourself and hang it on there. But when you got a little hoist or a lift that can help you get it up and you can just kind of position it, it makes it a lot easier. So that's this video, everybody. My next video is going to be on my propeller by Warp Drive. I am still dumbfounded why anybody would ever buy a propeller for an ultralight that's not ground adjustable. Because over the testing I've been doing is I've been breaking in my engine, and now I know my exhaust isn't completely right yet, okay? But this propeller is such an important thing. Here it's showing how you can adjust what degrees you want, and I'm going to go through how you do all of this, okay? But this Warp Drive and the company themselves are so cool to work with. I don't know why anybody would not want to have a ground adjustable prop. So I want to tell you two things I've learned about this. Very originally, I was going to go with a 250cc, basically model airplane engine, and it was too light. So I've had a couple of people say, yeah, but you know, you should have done it because it would have been cool for the model airplane community. Think about if you're an aircraft designer, and how do I say this? If you have a targeted weight for the airplane, a very specific targeted weight, which I do. I don't want to go over 254 pounds. But you also know you have a target of horsepower you need to fly it. So let's say you know the AirBike would fly on 26 to 28 horsepower, okay? But you're going to, and you are saving, let's say 20, 25 pounds on the motor because it's a really light 250cc engine. But you're going to have to add the weight back in to get the CG right, because the motor is so light, and you don't want to hang the motor 4 feet off the front of the airplane to get the CG right. So you've got to add literally 25 pounds of dead weight back to the airplane. The reason you like that engine so much is you're going to save that weight. The reason you're going on a marginal horsepower motor was to be 20 pounds under your maximum target weight of the 254 pounds. So it basically made it a bad idea to go with a light engine that was marginally powered. If I could have put a light engine in that was marginally powered, but got the CG right without a problem, had a lighter tail, let's say, maybe had a carbon fiber tail, who knows? It might have been a good idea, but this is something I didn't think about. I mean, this is total blunder on my fault. So by having this engine that's actually a few pounds overweight, but I'm getting somewhere between 32 and 34 horsepower out of it, which is plenty of horsepower, is the reason that I ultimately ended up with a Kawasaki 340. Now, on my exhaust is something I made up as a figment of my imagination. I did have a couple of exhaust buddies kind of give me some dimensions and stuff. But my exhaust the exhaust hole or the exit is still a very large diameter that I haven't started restricting yet. Because on two-stroke engines, and this was a big argument on my Facebook one day, people are like, you have to have an exhaust chamber on a two-stroke or it won't run. And that's not true. Chainsaws don't have that big exhaust chamber, okay? But if you want to get a lot of efficiency, so imagine a chainsaw needs to have a certain amount of power to move the chain to cut down a certain side of the tree. They're just going to go up in cubic inches on that engine until they get to the way they want to cut it down. They're not tuning the exhaust to give you that extra power. But on my airplane, I'm not looking for what they call a tune exhaust, where the shock waves and all this stuff is working with each other. And I'm not even sure how that works with a two-cylinder two-stroke inline, okay? But there is a point where you want the back pressure to be high enough that it helps the engine run better. You could take apart some of the mopeds back in the 80s and 90s and take the muffler off them. They actually ran like crap because they needed that exhaust back pressure to get the engine to run right. So as I go to tweak out my engine, I'm going to get the prop pitch set so I'm about 200 RPM under red line on the ground, because when you get in the air, it kind of unloads. But then I'm going to start restricting my exhaust and see as my power comes up, if I hit red line on the ground, I'll shut off the airplane, readjust a little bit more pitch in the prop. That's the reason the ground adjustable prop is so kick-ass, folks. I don't know how somebody could just buy a wooden prop, put it on an airplane, and let's say that prop's only 80% efficient for the horsepower you're getting out of that engine. I don't, and I'm not knocking people buying. If you know for a fact the horsepower, RPM, the prop pitch, and everything you want in a wooden prop, buy them, because they are gloriously beautiful props. Wood props just look so sexy on an airplane. But I'm talking about pure performance here. If you're wanting to get every bit of performance that you could possibly get out of an ultralight engine, getting a ground adjustable pitch prop, I think, is the only way to go. So that's it for this video, everybody. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you haven't. I'm trying to build my YouTube. And I'm definitely going to have videos going back and forth between my radio control world and my AirBike Ultralight. Okay? Oh, and I've had a couple of people ask me, am I going to like share videos of it flying? And I did create a weird thing with my model airplanes. I can't fly a model airplane and videotape at the same time. And I have mounted a lot of cameras to my airplanes when they fly. Okay, it's something I've done. I've had a lot of fun. But unless I got a person with me when I fly a model airplane to videotape my airplane flying, that just doesn't happen that much. It's one reason there's not a lot of video of me flying my big airplanes, unless a third party did the video. But on my ultralight, my AirBike, I'm going to have 2 or 3 GoPros mounted to it every time I fly it. And I'm going to create video logs of every flight I do. So there is going to be a boatload of video of me flying the AirBike. Now, they will be mounted on the airplane. I mean, watching an ultralight fly in the air from the ground would get boring after a while. But watching them mounted on the airplane when I go cruise around the cornfields of Indiana, I think that's going to be pretty kick-ass. So that's it, everybody. Please like and subscribe. I always, in my videos, trying to get youth into aviation, basically into model aviation, because it's a gateway drug to being an engineer or a fighter pilot or just cool things. Okay, so please get kids involved. Don't give me the argument that parents don't have enough time, because parents can take kids to play football, basketball, hockey. If the kid wants to get into aviation, feed that hunger, and cool things can happen. So rock on, everybody. I'll see you next time. Be safe. Be good to each other. The world's crazy out there. See ya.